Good afternoon. Well, good morning. Almost afternoon, everyone. We're almost there. We're going to go ahead and get started today. Welcome. Thank you for joining. We're all grateful to have you here for today's discussion. My name is Ryan McCullough. I'm a benefits consultant with Gallagher here in Nashville, and your ambassador alongside John Heil for today's webinar. We've got a really exciting presentation for everyone today. We have Kevie and Chris from Gallagher who will be going over how the work world has changed with the emergence of artificial intelligence. They'll talk through the various forms of AI in the workplace, the rise of government and private regulation of its uses. They'll also discuss the responsibility of fair AI practice that you can use to harness the power of AI at your company. So as we go through today's presentation, feel free to put your questions in the chat. There's a Q&A feature at the bottom. We could also unmute you to ask questions live if you'd like to. And finally, a follow-up email will be sent after the discussion today for the continuing education credit information. So I'll go ahead and get us started. Let me kick off with introductions to our speakers. Kevie Mikus from Gallagher specializes in providing thought leadership and consultative support to organizations in the areas of human resources, strategic management, employee engagement strategies, leadership development, HR function optimization, compliance, as well as compensation and total rewards. She does a lot. She's responsible for exploring the unique talent-related priorities and the needs of organizations while aligning Gallagher's expertise on vast resources to help them design and appropriately invest in their unique employee value proposition based on data and insights from workforce, culture, and business objectives. Kevie supports her clients' organizational well-being by collaborating with them to develop HR best practices for recruiting, retaining, and engaging key talent. And Chris Baldwin is the national leader in Gallagher's HR technology consulting practice. He's part of a team that helps clients strategize, buy, implement, and optimize their investments in HR technology. His team helps build a better approach to HR technology and organizational well-being. So please welcome Chris and Kevie. And Chris, I will turn it over to you to share your PowerPoint. Thank you. And we got you muted, Chris.
Double mute caught me. All right. Loud and clear now, though. We're good. All right, fantastic. Well, let's get started. Thank you for the introduction. So first and foremost, a little transparency here. This is Kevie and I's first time doing this virtually. So you may see me wander in and out of the screen frequently because I'm used to wandering around. And also, you'll see my hands flying up a lot. I'm a very theatrical person. You'll see why here in just a little bit. But as we get started, let's take a look at the title, right? The Wild West comes alive again in the modern age in the form of AI. It may seem a little dramatic, but if we kind of investigate it, is it really? If we think about the Wild West, what was it? Well, like AI, it wasn't really regulated. It was all kind of self-governing. Just like the Wild West, nefarious and criminal elements have found ways to take advantage of the lawlessness to some extent that we all need to be aware of. And it's new. It was new, just like AI is. And because of the nascentness of this technology, organizations, committees, employers, and governing bodies are still finding ways to kind of effectively regulate this environment. So for today's conversation, we structured this kind of in a walk, crawl, run mentality, realizing that we may cover some stuff at the very beginning that may be remedial for some of you, but we wanted to make sure we carried everybody along on the journey and that nothing went over anybody's head. So as Ryan alluded to, there's chat functions available. There may be some questions along the way. We can absolutely interrupt throughout or hold questions towards the end. But with that, let's kind of get rocking and rolling. So one of the bad things about these virtual presentations is you got a brief introduction on who Kevie and I are, but of course we're more than just our business and job titles and functions. So we thought we'd take just a few minutes to kind of introduce who we are as people, and then maybe as we go along and facilitate these relationships further, we'll get an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better as well. So who is this guy that's talking today other than being an HR technology and AI nerd? Well, I'm originally from New Orleans. I'm a gearhead through and through. You'll see that throughout the conversation today. I'll more than likely use more than a handful of car analogies, so you'll have to forgive me and stick with me through some of those. And if you can't tell from also the posters behind me, I'm a huge Formula One fan. I went to University of Oklahoma where I got my degree in drama. That's right. My degree literally says a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Drama, a point that my wife always manages to bring out when maybe I'm overreacting a little bit too much. She's always got the trump card of you studied how to be dramatic for 4 years. You don't know how not to be dramatic. Like a lot of 20 somethings that get a degree in drama, you move to one of two places. I can't sing to save my life, so New York was and Broadway was out of the question. So I moved out to LA right in the middle of the housing crunch of 2008 and during an acting strike, which means instead of doing a lot of acting, I did a lot of this. I waited a lot of tables, slept on a lot of couches, maybe slept in my car a few times as well. Realized, hey, this thing was a lot more fun as a hobby than it was or it is for a living. So I moved to Dallas, Texas. Bamboozled my way into the industry through United Healthcare. Loved my time there at United Healthcare. Then had some multiple opportunities to join some consulting firms. And of course, Gallagher stood out from all the rest. And that's why I'm here today. And the reason I do what I do, like many of us, this is Emma and this is Alexandria. And this is us decorating our Mardi Gras tree after a little Christmas, kind of a New Orleans tradition a little bit. So, Kevie, maybe you could take yourself off mute and do the same thing so we can get to know you a little bit.
Okay, super. And I appreciate the opportunity. And yes, you will see Chris and I attended competing universities in the same state. Our big Bedlam event, and Chris, I do have to rub it in just a little bit that OSU did beat OU this past Bedlam, which was the final and like last Bedlam since we are kind of parting and going to SEC, et cetera. Life is going to be very, very different. But we value working together and excited to be a part of this conversation, which is an ongoing conversation as it relates to AI and how we can leverage that as HR leaders in our organizations. And ironically, while at OSU, I actually, unlike Chris, I am doing what I got a degree in. So I have a degree in business management and actually minored in human resources. So anyway, while there, I was in a sorority and I'm still active in as an alum and love that. And so for my pastimes, you can see I'm a little bit all over the place, or maybe just diverse in terms of what settles me and what ignites me. So I love local sports. We have a pool in our backyard as of last summer, and so I'm thoroughly enjoying that. That's kind of my Zen place. I exercise there, and then I also float there, and particularly like it when I'm in it by myself without any other family members. I don't know what that says about me, but I do have to go and recharge, and that's the place that I like to do that. All the way to, trying to keep my brain active and doing things like word search puzzles and those sorts of things. So yes, and I have a deep fondness for MT SHRM, having been a part of this group for many, many years. Ironically, years ago, I was part of kind of the ground foundational team that ignited and started the Williamson County chapter. And I served in Rochelle's role as, kind of program chair and director. served as, when this existed, the HR Excellence Awards. And I missed that terribly. That was so very exciting, I think, for organizations to participate in and gain insight from. So I was an examiner all those years ago. So for any of you who would like to learn more about that or be a part of like reigniting that, I think it would be really amazing. And last but not least, those who are near and dear to my heart, that's my husband, Dan, and our two kids. Grant is 22, and I truly can say I have a rocket scientist for a son. He graduated with a degree in aerospace engineering, and it has like flown the nest and is doing exceptionally well. And then our 13-year-old daughter, if I can survive her these next few years of teen and middle school, then, you know, just please be with me. And I will channel your energy and good thoughts and probably sympathies, because many of you are maybe in that very same spot yourselves. And then like cutie patootie on the screen there is our puppy Hank. And he's really the life of the party, and I get my joy and energy from him as well. So back to you, Chris, to get us going with our content. Enough about us, right?
Exactly, right. Well, let's take the next 40 minutes and then geek out a little bit on AI, hopefully learn a little bit about the current state of AI, the future state of AI, how it can impact employers, how it's impacting the globe, right? So you can see here, I won't read verbatim, you can see some of the key takeaways, right? At a very core is understanding what AI is, which is actually, for being only 4 words long, is actually a tricky bullet point there. And we're going to address that on the very beginning as part of this crawl, walk, run that we discussed today. We're also going to talk about how to apply it within HR, benefits, your communications, recruitment, retention, and along with that, some safe next steps with regards to AI. So let's get cracking into this real fast. So I want to start off several years ago. AI was a buzzword that was used in HR technology, any kind of technology. AI was a placeholder for kind of any kind of what we would call intelligent technology. So I think it's important to first define kind of what is AI and what isn't, because in my experience, we're still being sold intelligent technology as AI. So what is the difference? I want you to think about it in terms of like the difference between AI versus hyper automation. So if we take a look at the example here, the definition of hyper automation here, and I want you to think of hyper automation in these HR terms, right? If we think about, say, a PTO request, I, as an employee, want to take 2 days off in 2 months' time. I go into the PTO system, request it. The system projects out and determines whether or not Chris will have accrued enough time by that time to take PTO. If it does, it sends a little check mark, goes to my manager. My manager then approves it in the same system, which then goes back and translates into the scheduling system. That is hyperautomation. The computer in that instance, or the software, actually made no decisions. It's merely doing what I call long division work and trying to move things along very quickly. Now, if we take a look at artificial intelligence, it's the ability of machines to perform tasks associated with human intelligence, like learning and problem solving. I think that's a really long, contrived definition, which is why I've highlighted my favorite definition of AI, which is number 2 there under Merriam-Webster, which is the capability of a machine to imitate human behavior. So this is part of that crawl, walk, run, right? So I want you to be thinking about, when you're hearing terms like AI, to be inquisitive, not just take it at face value, and really try to determine, is this true artificial intelligence, or is it a machine trying to imitate human behavior, or is it simply hyper automation? It's important to have those definitions as we're going through the rest of the conversation for today. Let's take a brief snapshot, though, and by brief, I mean quite brief, because we could probably do this presentation 6 months from now, and this slide looks different. That's how rapid this industry is moving. But let's take a brief snapshot of the landscape of AI, or large language models, that exist in the market, and some of the little idiosyncrasies and good to know about this. So first of all, for those of you that are bar trivia fans, we've all heard ChatGPT, right? I put down there at the bottom what GPT actually stands for. It is Generative Pre-trained Transformer, and it's merely the way that it goes about getting its data. So let's talk about the landscape as it looks today, and then I will bring out my crystal ball and play soothsayer a little bit and tell you kind of what I see the future starting to look like. The most popular that we've all probably heard of is ChatGPT. ChatGPT 4 is the most current version of that, and it's from OpenAI. ChatGPT 5 is coming, I believe, this summer. I read the early release notes. ChatGPT 5 is going to be the next evolution of AI, and the next evolution being moving into media. So think voice, think video. We've all heard of the deep fake videos, right? Think about the next iteration of that, to being able to go and say, think about your marketing team and your organization. Think about being able to go into ChatGPT 5 and saying, our organization has these 5 pillars of values. These are the culture that builds up our organization. Can you make me a brief 90-second video that goes into those and why it's beneficial, so that we can post to LinkedIn for marketing purposes? ChatGPT 5 more than likely will be able to knock you out not only a video, but possibly narration with an avatar, probably much better looking than the one you're looking at right now, to go through all those. So that's really exciting, but also fills me with some trepidation, and we'll talk about some of that trepidation coming up here shortly. Gemini from Google, which was previously barred. One of the interesting things here is Microsoft and Meta have combined forces for Llama. Microsoft, though, is hedging its bets. Microsoft has also invested tens of billions of dollars in OpenAI, which leads me to my crystal ball soothsayer here. There's also Claude, of course, with Anthropic, which is not as popular. But for those of you at a certain age, and I'll do a couple of analogies here to hopefully cover my bases. If you're a Gen Z or a millennial, you'll probably remember HD DVD versus Blu-ray. Blu-ray disc won out. If you're a little bit older, it was VHS versus Betamax, and kind of VHS won out. There's more than likely only going to be 1, 2, possibly 3 winners in this. And I think that prediction's dead on, because why else would Microsoft be not only developing their own, but also investing heavily in yet another? So while over the short-term time frame, we'll more than likely see this slide expand into several, over the lifespan of AI, and probably in the nearer term than we probably imagine, it'll probably go down to a core 2 or 3 that make up the majority of the market. So that gives you enough rough idea of exactly who's playing in the market. But I wanted to set the stage real quickly as we continue to talk about not just AI, but technology in general, and tell you a very quick story. So when I was in high school, I was a theater kid, but I was also a track and field guy, which means that I was at school very late into the evenings for rehearsal, but also had track and field practice at 5:30 a.m. I was a working. My mom was a working mom, and my father was a domestic violence detective, police officer, who worked. I think his hours were 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. and was on call all the time, which means I had a tough time getting back and forth to school. Eventually, 5:30 a.m. drop-offs and 11 p.m. pickups from school, you kind of burn through your friends' parents really quickly. I needed a way to get to and from school. So I managed to save up about $800 from doing odd jobs around the neighborhood, like mowing lawns, things like that. And I managed to save up, and I bought a 1969 Datsun Roadster. Well, actually, mine looked a little bit more like this one here. I bought a 1969 Datsun Roadster. Now, let me give you some things about this Roadster and provide some context to this story. So this Datsun Roadster had a 1.6-liter motor in it, which in 1969, from the factory, made a whopping 89 horsepower. It only had 2 seats in it. and it had no air conditioning. Not that the air conditioning wasn't working, it was not a factory option. They just did not offer air conditioning. And on top of that, one of the safety features, along with the lap belt, there was no shoulder harness, but one of the safety features that's mentioned in the owner's manual, and this is no joke, I should have brought it up so I could show you, because by the way, I still have this car, was padded dashboard. Now, you saw my family picture at the beginning. I live in Dallas, Texas, where it's triple digits a good 3 to 4 months out of the year, if you're lucky. I usually dress like this to go to work. And everywhere in Dallas is an interstate. You can't take side streets anywhere. Everything's miles away. So if you take this car and apply it to my current day situation, first of all, we're a family of 4. This car's only got 2 seats. It only has 89 horsepower, which, you know, factory. There's no way it's making it up to 60 miles an hour on the interstates here in Dallas. The safety feature, padded dashboards, I'm not going to put my family in a situation where they're in an unsafe predicament. And also no air conditioning. I would be dripping in sweat to every client appointment I went to if I took this car there. Does that make this car a bad car, though? Well, let's rewind 20 some odd years to when I had the car in high school. I was a 16-year-old guy. My mom was not worried about there being 2 seats. In fact, she was worried that there were 2 seats because she frankly would have preferred me not driving anybody around in this thing. No air conditioning, no problem. I was a sweaty 16-year-old boy anyway. I showered after track and field in the morning before the school day, and no horsepower. I was driving in my local neighborhood from my school or from my house to my school. There was no need to go fast in this thing. I'm telling you this story because, like this car, technology, and just like AI, is not inherently good nor bad. There's just good or bad fits or situations for it. So this car was a great car for 16-year-old Chris. For 41-year-old Chris, not so much. I want you to remember this Datsun story as you're investigating technology solutions, including AI, for your organization. And just remember, very rarely are there bad technologies. There's just bad fits. Let's talk about that in more detail as it applies to AI. Hopefully Datsun sticks in your head. And for those of you at a certain age, by the way, Datsun has become Nissan. So Datsun is what Nissan used to be called. I know most of us already know that. So let's talk about this good versus bad, right? Is there such a good thing, or as such a thing as good AI? Well, let's take a look at some of the notes here. I guess it depends on what your definition of good is. So MIT research across 14 large language models, which is what AI, ChatGPT is based off of, found that ChatGPT-4 was the most left-wing libertarian leaning from a political perspective, and Meta's Llama 2 was the most right-wing authoritarian leaning. So I want to put in some context for you today. AI is almost always, not almost, is always going to be influenced, at least for the time being, from its data set, and even to the extent the founders or the creators built it upon. So there's absolutely good AI if your inputs are correct and you don't overextend the system or have unrealistic expectations of what it's spitting back. We need to remember that ChatGPT and all of these AI models do come inherent with some bias. Your queuing of questions within AI will absolutely help you garner better and better results. And we'll talk a little bit about that queuing in of questions, or what's called prompts, here in just a little bit. I want to draw attention to the Carnegie Mellon professor here that said that we believe no language model can be entirely free from political biases. We're also noticing that bias across the board, which will lend itself very productively to our conversation around recruitment, onboarding, and using AI in hiring practices in the future. So I think it is important, though, for us to talk about really true less than good AI that more than likely none of you would ever be involved in or have exposure to. But I think it's important, especially as we move into the next generation of what AI is going to be capable of doing, a la ChatGPT-5 with all the multimedia. It's worth noting that there is a fraud GPT, and it's absolutely real, and it's found on the dark web. I find it kind of slightly comical that it is subscription-based. So most people pay for access to it with Bitcoin, and it is constantly updated. It's built specifically for these malicious activities, phishing emails, cracking tools. We heard about the big auto dealer hack that took place not too long ago. And it just goes to show that free form in this Wild West, criminal elements and nefarious elements will move in to take advantage of new opportunities. We have to ask questions and figure out the regulation around this. I want to draw attention, if I can, to one specific call out that gives me the heebie-jeebies. I'm sure that many of you on your laptops today, most new laptops have the little slider screen that goes around your camera, right? Before that was a built-in feature. What did we all do to our cameras? Put the little sticky part of the Post-it over the camera, right? We may be entering a next phase of evolution of this self-security, or what I call digital hygiene. This last bullet point, and I think this comes from Fortune magazine. In fact, I'm pretty sure this is the one it comes from. AI is now capable of listening to your keystrokes and with 95% accuracy, being able to determine what you're typing. So I want you to marinate on that for just a second. Imagine your employees that have access to intellectual property or HIPAA information. Think about the carrier reps, United Healthcare, Blue Cross, that you're talking to that are entering data. Just think if there was a malicious software that gets put on any of these computers, not just computers, but a cell phone sitting in the room that's actively listening to keystrokes. Think about it picking up social security numbers. Thinking about it picking up protected health information, credit card numbers, any personal identifiable information. We are going to be entering into a new phase of digital hygiene awareness that we're going to have to take upon ourselves that we never thought capable before. So this goes to show that there absolutely are nefarious elements moving into AI. And I want you to imagine the old Mad Magazine Spy versus Spy, where there's one step forward, two steps back, here goes here goes here. The regulation that exists in AI is always going to be playing catch up to the nefarious elements. They're always going to be out there. And it's just something that we have to be aware of. I want to tell another quick story here that's built into this, this quote that you see here on the side. And then we'll keep the motor running, as I realize we're already at the top of the hour. So Stephen Schwartz was an attorney. He was part of I believe it was a personal injury suit against Avianca Airlines, which I think is either a Colombian or a Venezuelan airline. Stephen Schwartz was putting together his case to be presented in front of the court. Stephen, being a good lawyer, knows that court citations can help bolster a case. So he asked ChatGPT for help writing his briefs. Now, ChatGPT only knows the rules of the road, right? We talked about bias, and I'll talk about another thing here in just a little bit with regards to truth versus false. Stephen asked it to write its briefs. ChatGPT knows that putting those citations can bolster a court case. So it wrote him briefs, and it gave him, let me see my notes here. I think it gave him 6. It gave him 6 court citations to present to the court to help bolster his personal injury case. None of those 6 court cases were factual. ChatGPT completely fabricated them. I say this because as of July 16, 2024 at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, ChatGPT cannot detect between true and false. It's up to us to monitor it, to double check it. This goes back to, I always say all the time, keep the human in HR. This is a time where just keep human in the workforce, keep human in every aspect of this. Please, Stephen absolutely should have been using ChatGPT to help just proofread his briefs or take a look at this here and there. But the moment he depended on ChatGPT to go do research and present him with something that he would then present to the court was a huge failing. And as you could see there, he was utterly embarrassed. He, his partner, and his law firm were fed sanctions and given pretty large fines as well. So just remember, ChatGPT and most of this AI models cannot determine a true from a false. So A couple of examples and ways I want you to think about ChatGPT possibly. One from futurist here, Dr. Michio Kaku, who if you watch anything on Discovery Science Channel or the Smithsonian Channel, you've seen him before. He likens AI to a glorified tape recorder, right? It is just the massive information that sits on the internet that AI then goes and pulls little snippets from and then presents it as its own. I like to think personally of AI as a glorified grad student. And what I mean by that is you think, you ask ChatGPT a question, right? It goes and pulls all the data and presents it back as its own. That reminds me a lot of my college professors asking me to perform or propose something based off of a prompt that they give me. Hey, Chris, go find out this, this, and this, and present a 30-page document on it. I then go to the college library, depending on your age. You went to the internet, you went here, you went there, you cited your sources, and then you presented the information kind of as your own. AI is essentially doing the same thing, which is why it's having a lot of problems right now discerning truth from fiction, right? On the internet, there's loads and loads, unlike what Abraham Lincoln said here, which is, by the way, one of my favorite memes. Everything on the internet is not true, which is why when it takes these snippets from the internet, we have to have our due diligence and kind of cross-check what it's presenting us with to make sure it is in fact true. Okay, let's take a beat and a slight break as we kind of change tactics here or change topics. A little tongue-in-cheek imagery here. Regulation is in full bloom globally at the moment. So let's talk about the regulations. Now, regulations are not one of the sexiest or funnest things to talk about, but if we want to bring out our crystal ball, if we want to be soothsayers about what's going to be happening in the United States with regard to regulation, we have to have our eyes up and look what's going on in the rest of the globe. Because if you follow history at all, the US may, and usually does, kind of hold off in imparting regulation, seeing what works and what fails across the globe, and then also locally in some states, and then builds its federal regulation based off of that. So a little brief history lesson here is Italy was the first country to, at least temporarily, ban ChatGPT while regulators kind of determine how to use it. It's still banned in 7 countries. It is worth noting, all 7 of those countries tend to lean more authoritarian, so not surprising there. And then this last one is Europe is poised to impose a blanket ban on some unacceptable uses of AI and guardrails around high-risk applications. I draw your attention to this, and I'm going to do a presenting no-no here. I'm going to read directly from my notes because it's that important. I feel this regulation will directly influence and can influence what's going to be going on in the United States. So, first and foremost, the European Union, their AI Act, outlaws social scoring systems powered by AI and any kind of biometric tracking that tracks a person's race, political leanings, or sexual orientation. As a red-blooded American, I'm like, yay, keep the government out of my business. They don't need to know any of that about me. There's also this part here to sentiment analysis. Sentiment analysis is already taking place in the United States. There are already technology platforms that have sentiment analysis built in. For those of you that aren't aware, a brief definition or a brief kind of snapshot of what sentiment analysis is think about the ability to implant a software overlay on top of your network. It will then report back, hey man, Kevie logs in early every morning. She seems to be really invested in the organization. All of her verbiage is positive tonally, very cheerleading. Chris is in and out off the computer all day. The tone on his emails, the tone on what we pick up from his chats, they all seem to be slightly agitated. He may be a flight risk. He may be at risk of leaving the organization. That, in a broad way, is sentiment analysis. What the EU is really cracking down on is an employer's ability to implant such software to have that sentiment analysis about their employees, but also, and here's the creepy part, is the likelihood, planting that sentiment analysis globally or over a country, and determining a person's likelihood to commit a future crime. So, Any of you that are Steven Spielberg fans or Tom Cruise fans or just overall sci-fi nerds, sounds an awful lot like the movie or the book, the series Minority Report. So that's one of the reasons the EU is starting to impose these regulations, is to hopefully protect individual freedoms of individuals, which sounds an awful lot like one of the flags that we carry here in the US. So wouldn't be surprised if some of these sanctions that are happening within the global European markets do make their way into the US, especially around the sentiment analysis aspect. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about what's going on in the schools. I think it's quite obvious. This is really around plagiarism. Plagiarism has always been a factor in universities and schools, and always will be. AI and ChatGPT is only making it easier, or a path of least resistance for a lot of folks to use. So the regulation that's going on there, I don't think is insanely applicable to our conversation for today. And seeing that we're kind of running a little short on time, I want to just kind of cut it out. And if we want to talk further about the plagiarism aspects of AI, we can absolutely do that. So wrapping up, before I turn the mic over to Kevie here, some of the legal side effects that are happening. So to be aware of. So in December of last year, the New York Times filed a suit against Microsoft and OpenAI because the systems were pulling flat plagiarism from the New York Times and passing it on at its own. So this is a landmark case to some extent, because you think about people who produce any kind of intellectual capital. I don't know what kind of organizational intellectual properties that you all have as organizations that give you strength. Think about the ability of ChatGPT to find that somewhere, take it out and transplant it somewhere else. Think about professional artists, musicians, songwriters, musicians, playwrights, anything in an artistic capacity, to the same thing. This overall regurgitation that's happening, OpenAI is setting as a bug, and they're working to fix it. But once again, it's cautionary tale for you if you're using ChatGPT. Again, not only can it not currently determine a truth from a false, it may just be giving you flat regurgitated information, especially for those that you that are outward facing and maybe doing some marketing for your organization. The last thing you want to do is go and share a competitor's thought leadership that ChatGPT pulled down, only to have to deal with the fallout from that later. We won't spend time talking about Gemini and Bard, other than it's worth noting that our control over what is put into that giant tape recorder that we alluded to, the control over that data is becoming less and less manual and becoming automated. Think about the Apple iTunes agreement, right? We all kind of agree to it in order to use our phone. I would anticipate that we're going to continue to get legalese put in front of us in order just to use our devices. The little bit that we won't know is that we're authorizing these organizations, these devices, to share data, whatever or however that data is prepared, and going on to that giant tape recorder. So it goes back to my digital hygiene comment. We will all have to become really, really good experts at managing not only our own digital hygiene, but that of our employers, and probably more importantly, our family members as well. All right, a couple of last things to talk about here is the legal side effects on the data use. AI is only going to become better and better because it gets better and better the more we as a society use it, and the better it gets at deciphering truth from false, the better it gets at noticing its own biases and trying to counter it. And there's my analogy over there. It's the same way that students learn, right? AI is reading the vastness of the internet. It's learning more and more and more. And then with that, the ability to regurgitate and be able to recite with its own spin on certain items. So with that, Kevie, I'll give everybody's ears a break from my droning voice, and I'll turn the mic over to you to talk about some of the stuff that's going on with the EEOC as it applies directly to the US.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Chris. Well, most of you may know this already because the EEOC broke new ground officially August 9th, almost a year ago in 2023. And it settled its first AI case for $365,000. The EEOC brought suit against a company alleging the company's AI-powered hiring selection tool automatically rejected female applicants over the age of 55 and male applicants over the age of 60. Applicants were allegedly asked for birth date information, which should not be the case anyway, as part of the AI process. An applicant thought something was fishy about the process and submitted a second application with a younger birth date. So the first time the candidate was rejected, the second time the candidate scored an interview. So we now recognize the importance of and have yet again another area as HR professionals to keep in mind from a compliance perspective. This is really critical. And so some of the key points being employers using AI in hiring process can be liable for unintended discrimination. So again, even if we're using this tool, we can't, shift blame or focus. So we have to be actively involved in understanding what we are getting into, review those contracts, really ensure that we are holding those contractors and what is in the legalese, if you will. So ideally, you as HR professionals are already partnering with your IT colleagues, marketing colleagues. Ideally, there's some form of a task force that you have put together to look at all angles. So not only, how do we maximize this for our brand? How do we maintain compliance and ensure that we are not at risk? How do we leverage this for efficiency and or heightening the employee experience? And we'll get into that in just a little bit as well. So it is critical that we have to be good stewards, just like any other contract we enter into, that we push those vendors on, what are your practices for ensuring that those team members involved with or supporting this tool receive, bias training. How often are you, or how frequently are you, testing against that? So we have to push and ask questions so we can safeguard ourselves. So as Chris mentioned, as it relates to our stance from a US perspective, we're really going to follow other countries as well as look at what other states are doing and kind of follow suit and kind of make that a federal response. So we don't have in the US a federal response per se, but we do have some US states and municipalities who have put things, into play. So we've got New York City, so not New York, but New York City, candidate notification and right to know, annual audits, fines for violators. So there are parameters, very, kind of strict parameters as it relates to an employer notifying a candidate that some form of AI software is being used. And it does require those independent auditor checks, if you will, that, that technology is being looked at and used annually and kind of checked for bias. Candidates can request and be told what data is being collected and analyzed, which probably is not a bad thing. The final rules that were released, and they are much more business friendly than the original rule that was put out there, are continuing to take form. There are fines for violators, as you can imagine. So another area is within Illinois, pre-interview notification and consent to candidates if you're using AI technology, and there are certainly confidentiality guidelines. Maryland is an interesting scenario in which somewhere around 2020, right, we all maybe have PTSD from even just hearing the word 2020. So the pandemic really did kind of spark a lot of regulations around ban the box and usage of AI because we were doing everything remote. And so that's when people really did start to lean in and leverage AI. So, initially there was a ban the box, and Maryland, or at least we had some folks kind of circumventing that as it relates to some of the restrictions within ban the box. And so we started having folks using kind of this facial recognition element and, kind of trying to, in the backdrop or in the background, check people out, if you will, in a variety of ways through use of technology. So hence, we have a little bit more clamped down because of some of that response and what came out initially being kind of ban the box and some of the other things that employers started to do to circumvent some of that. Some other states that are coming, California, New Jersey, and then New York State. And there's about 13 others in discussion. So this is just going to continue to be a cycle for which more states are going to come on board. So this is just some recommendations from Chris and mine, our vantage point, having worked with some clients in this space. I know at Gallagher, we use a private use AI whose background is ChatGPT. What's critical is that you've got a policy in place. And ensuring that there are some key elements in that policy. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's a great, smart practice to have some sort of a task force internally. And that also helps you as HR professionals not have to bear the brunt of a lot of these decisions and policy elements. So one being just ensuring that it covers data entry and the uses and entry and what kind of data is allowable and is not. And specifically, this is kind of one of those cautionary tales. So while we want to leverage this tool, we still have to ensure that our folks are not ever entering classified information or anything that's deemed confidential or restricted, or in other words, our intellectual capital. Because as Chris mentioned earlier, you have to view AI as one big tape recorder. So, of which there could be vulnerabilities to that, and ensuring that we do not inadvertently place exposure into or on our organization. No use of AI systems for company business. In other words, actively monitoring, and this is where your IT department is going to be really critical, from the company network to public accessible AI tools. So ensuring, again, those safeguards. And then just reserving the right to take action and block usage. So really ensuring that people aren't going rogue, that this is a very safeguarded and monitored process for which your tech team is highly involved. And certainly it can, as we know, support productivity. So permitting AI for productivity, if abiding by the first two rules that I mentioned, start to dabble in it. And Chris and I, you'll hear that from us frequently, putting in or asking for a job description for an HR associate, or fill in the blank for whatever job title you might be recruiting for, or summarize an employee policy. So start at kind of ground level and play around with it. It really can serve a good purpose as you are entering into, how can we leverage this tool and identify use cases for it. And then just obviously no public sharing of AI generated content. And please, as we learn from the attorney that Chris mentioned, you still need to do your fact checking and ensure that you are really validating, if you will, the information and checking multiple sources. So it can be a great foundational start of data elements, but you always want to do what you can to ensure that you've rounded that out. Chris, back to you.
Thank you so much. I had to quickly find the unmute button. So let's start motoring through. We'll do a quick time check. It's 12:20 here. We'll make sure we get everybody out ahead of time and answer any questions. Feel free. I think I saw 1 or 2 questions come in on the chat or comments. We'll address those as well. So keep those coming hot and heavy. I will do my best to motor through some of these ones that may not be of the most value so that we can get to some more content around Kevie and how AI can directly impact retention and recruitment specifically and how we're seeing it in the market. So first and foremost, I think some of the considerations and conversations that we see here is worth noting. One thing to call out here is you're more than likely going to hear, might not be in this election cycle, you're going to start using or hearing the word moderation of AI. That essentially, more than likely, if I'm pulling out my crystal ball again, will be a free speech movement within AI, so censorship. And we'll talk about moderation. We'll talk about these glossary of terms here in just a little bit. So that's really what I want you to take away from this one is just be aware there more than likely will be some federal gates on moderation around AI, like, hey, how can I sneak a gun into my school, even though we have metal detectors? And I know this is some crass stuff to be discussing here in this environment, but this is the reality of the reason why moderation or censorship will go through, how to make a bomb that's not detectable, how do I get past the TSA agent? If you think about all this, ChatGPT, unless told otherwise, is not going to know not to provide answers to those questions. Or take another step further, for those of you that are fans of the Patriot Act, for example, at what point is ChatGPT obligated to contact authorities based off of your search history within ChatGPT? So just over the next couple of years, that is going to be, for better or for worse, more than likely a next level of battleground around free speech, censorship, and it's all being called moderation. A couple of bullet points to jump out here, and I want you to play back in your head a little bit, especially those of you that have been in HR or around for a while in general. Think about the advent of, all of us are too young about the advent of electricity, but frankly, if you look back historically, America was not fully electrified, even like in rural areas. I think until like the mid-'80s was it fully electrified, and electricity started, I think, 94 years ago, right? The internet came about in 1983. Think about by the time you actually got a desktop in your house that was plugged into the American Online cable, when everybody you knew kind of had that. Really long runway for that. We are seeing an astronomically high adoption rate for AI. And once again, as we've said multiple times, AI only gets better and more advanced as we use it. So this adoption rate of 13% over the prior year, we're waiting to get new numbers for 2024 versus 2023. It's taken off like crazy. So if you feel like your head's spinning like it's never spun before, it's not a you problem. It is just, this is how quickly not only this industry is moving, but the adoption rate. You can see the overall usage of American companies using AI. The regulation, as we talked about, is trying to catch up of all this, which is leading to an evolution of not just HR, but people in general trying to be more strategic and less tactical by using things like AI. So I'll kind of say the last part here because we are running short on time. One of the questions Kevie and I get asked on a regular basis when they find out we're talking about AI is AI going to take my job, right? It's a natural fear-based reaction. And I'm here to tell you that bringing out a crystal ball is, do I think AI is going to take your job? No. Are people that don't take the time to invest in HR or in AI and learning it going to be more at risk of the whims from the employment perspective? Absolutely. But I do think that those of you, and you're taking the time today to learn more about it today, that continue to invest are going to be even better equipped to thrive in the AI environment. So quick note there. Another quick note, we talked about moderation, cnet.com. You can just Google CNET AI glossary. I would bookmark this or favorite it onto your desktop and revisit it on a regular basis. AI is brand new, therefore it's creating this whole new kind of nomenclature that exists, like moderation, that's out there. So keep this keep this on your taskbar. Be aware kind of what's going on. If you hear any new verbiage, it's really good to default back to. I check on it regularly, and I feel like they update it at least once a month. You'll see that this article's updated. So with that, with the final 5 minutes, Kevie, no pressure, 5 minutes. Let's talk about some of the direct impacts that it's having on recruiting and retention, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. And on average, many of you may feel this and say, absolutely, I'm in this boat. But HR managers lose 14 hours a week manually completing tasks that could be automated. So just considerable waste of time and productivity where AI and related tech tools can help us be efficient. And that came from Career Builder. So we've identified some healthy and useful ways in which AI can help recruitment efforts. So some of these are things that you're already doing. If you are not, this is a great way to dabble in it. Again, just the auto posting of job descriptions to targeted hiring sites. Chat bots can help through interfacing with interviewees and actually help interface with them directly, scan resumes, and then just moving that process along for candidates and relying on chatbots is probably a high usage for organizations. When we think about retention, here are some helpful tips to think about how AI could be leveraged in terms of retention. So Chris mentioned one of them in terms of really starting to potentially predict potential turnover and being able to circumvent that or get ahead of it. Maybe we use it in some form or fashion with reviews. All of these things, which you see on the screen and will have access to, are great levers that we can pull in terms of technology and the power behind it. Most importantly, though, please, I would say there's not going to be any sort of replacement for the human element and the importance of the human element for the employee experience, the leg up that you will have, and still the powerful interactions that you have with people in person. So again, these are some simple, like start dabbling in it, some ways in which you can tap into AI for some core tactical functions. Again, at the end of the day, what we want to help you do is to have more capacity for the strategic elements and the strategic impact that you can have on your organization. I know we want to leave time for questions.
Yes, perfect. I apologize. I get really ramped up about this. I probably ate into some extra time. So Rochelle, Ryan, we will turn the mic back over to you for some questions, comments, or just a general wrap up, but we'll stay online if we need any answers to some questions.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Kevie. What a fascinating conversation and somewhat scary from my perspective. That was, I learned a lot today. Thank you both. So as we wrap up today, we appreciate everyone's time. We want you to look forward to this week's event on Thursday morning, the breakfast meeting. The monthly meeting is at 7:30 a.m. at the Tennessee Society of Certified Public Accountants. The topic is violence in the workplace, best practices for preventing and responding to workplace incidents. So we hope to see you all there. Reminder that the continuing education credit email will follow later on. And if you could please scan this QR code on the screen to fill out a quick survey on today's topic and event, just to give us the feedback and help us prepare and shape the future events. So with that, thank you again for all of your time today. I saw one comment in the chat, not quite a question, so thanks for jumping in there. And then Chris, Kevie, I don't know if you got any direct questions or anything that needed to be answered, but we'll hang out for a few more minutes in case there's any questions. Thank you all.
All right, Ryan. Well, if you do get any questions that come in, feel free to let us know. Hopefully, we didn't leave everybody completely shaking with fear. AI is exciting, a tool to use, but just like driving a car for the first time, you do owe yourself a good deal of responsibility managing it and using it. So, thanks so much. I could speak for Kevie, and I'll let her speak for herself. We appreciate the invitation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.